Okay, I think I am live. Cool. All right, I had some um, technical challenges, but let's get started. Welcome to today's live Q&A. Today, we're going to go over a topic requested by almost every parent I have talked to these past 2 weeks, and that is sleep. We're going to talk about the biggest reasons your child may be struggling with sleep, falling asleep, staying asleep, and what you can start doing tonight to set them up for better rest over time. We'll walk through what healthy sleep actually looks like, what gets in the way, and how to use simple strategies to finally make bedtime feel a little more manageable. So let's go into it. Most families we work with tell us that they are exhausted. Their child won't fall asleep, or they fall asleep, but then they wake up at 2 in the morning and they stay up for an hour or two. Maybe they are waking up super early, resisting bedtime, needing a parent to stay with them until they're completely out or to fall asleep. And then they still wake up feeling tired or they have a hard time waking up. And then the parent has back and neck pain from falling asleep in their child's bed. What something that starts as a bad week or a bad day of sleep turns into weeks, then months, and then suddenly is really affecting your mood, your child's behavior, your marriage, and everything in between. You're definitely not alone if sleep is affecting your life this much. Sleep issues are one of the top concerns for families of kids with and without developmental disabilities. However, they are also very treatable. So once we understand what's actually going on, we're able to actually support that sleep a little bit more. So let's go into it even more. If you are a parent, and as I am bringing up sleep, you're already thinking, well, my problem is that my child doesn't need as much sleep. Let me tell you something. You are right. Some kids do need less sleep. Just like us adults, some of us thrive with 7 hours of sleep, some of us need 9 hours of sleep. There is an inherent variation in how much sleep each individual needs. However, it's very, very important to understand for kids that most kids are chronically tired and they don't show it by being sleepy or tired or fatigued or in the typical ways that we are used to people being tired. They actually show it by being hyper, irritable, aggressive, unable to focus. They seem like they're bouncing off the walls, and that is because their system goes into overdrive. When kids are not getting enough continuous sleep, meaning uninterrupted stretches of sleep, it affects everything. So, if your child looks like they have so much energy and simultaneously they are irritable or unfocused, there is a chance that they are overtired. And you can help them get back on track with the strategies we're going to go over next. But let's talk about why sleep is often so difficult for kids with developmental differences. There are three main reasons why that may be. The first one is that their internal sleep system is dysregulated. They basically don't feel tired at the right times, or they are overtired, but then they are also overtired and overwired when they are tired. So, that overtiredness and overwiring is the perfect setup for bedtime battles. The reason number two is that they are relying on you to fall asleep. They've learned that they need your presence, you rocking them, you singing to them, you laying in their bed with them, and they never learn how to fall asleep independently. And reason number three is that there is no clear, consistent routines, or that it is not the right routine specifically for your child, either too stimulating, too late, too inconsistent, or it is just simply not developmentally appropriate for your child's needs and their sensory profile. So, let's go deeper into each one of them. The first one, their internal system is dysregulated or they don't feel tired at the right times, like when it is time to go to bed. The first thing that we want to look at is your child even tired when you're putting them to bed? There is something called a wake window. The amount of time that your child needs to be awake before their body will be ready for sleep again. If their wake window, meaning if your child has been awake for a short period of time, then if their wake window is too short, you'll get best bedtime resistance. Now, if that wake window is too long, you'll get overtired energy. And that look can look like again like hyperactivity, dysregulation, irritability. It literally looks anything but actual tiredness. But I promise you, they are tired. So, a strategy for this is to track when they last woke up from their nap or in the morning and gradually adjust bedtime so that it lands at the right wake window for their age. For most kids over 2.5, that means a solid 5 to 6 hour wake window. So, for example, if your child is waking up at 4 p.m. from their nap and you're trying to put them to bed at 8, that is not a long enough wake window for their body to feel like they need to go to sleep. So you will probably get sleep resistance or bed resistance. After the age of 3, most kids drop their nap, and 3-year-olds can actually sustain a 12-hour wake window. This is super common that we all hear, well, kids need to sleep. Kids need to sleep longer. Yes, but we also have to know what they developmentally need for sleep. Otherwise, you will get that resistance at night. So, highly recommend that you track how long they have been awake to make sure that their bodies are actually needing the sleep before you attempt to put them to bed. Okay, so reason number 2 is that they rely on you to fall asleep. If your child needs you to lay next to them, rock them, rub their back, or do anything specific to fall asleep, they're not falling asleep independently. That means that when you wake up in the middle of the night, actually, when they wake up in the middle of the night, which we all do naturally, they won't know how to get back asleep without you. We all wake up in the middle of the night. The difference is that we don't notice because we know how to fall asleep again independently, but your child doesn't know. So when they initially fall asleep with you in the room and they wake up in the middle of the night and that environment has changed, meaning you are gone, their body does not fall asleep again. They look for what they started with, meaning you. We call these unsustainable sleep dependencies. Basically, that's a fancy word to say that your child needs something to fall asleep that won't work long term. Something that you cannot keep doing every night because it's too hard, it takes too long, or it depends on you. So, being there every night is unsustainable long term. A strategy that you can use for this is to gradually remove your presence. That means slowly removing yourself away from your child. So, for example, if you lay with them to fall asleep in their bed, instead of laying in their bed with them, you can sit down. You can do that for a period of time until your child consistently falls asleep, tolerating you sitting instead of laying. Then, instead of sitting in with them in their bed, maybe you can sit next to their bed. After sitting next to their bed, you can sit maybe 2 or 3 steps next to their bed, maybe by the door, and then the hallway, and then so on and so forth. The goal is to reduce your presence over time. And then over time, also, your child learns that they are safe and they are capable of falling asleep all on their own. That's how you start removing yourself from that, what we call that sleep dependency. And the third reason is that the routine isn't clear or consistent. Think about it. If bedtime looks different every night, your child doesn't know what to expect. That creates anxiety and confusion. Or maybe your child struggles with transitions, going from playing with toys to bedtime can be very abrupt and very challenging. So, a strategy for this is to use a visual schedule. It can be with pictures, with words. It does not have to be fancy. You can literally grab a piece of paper and write it out. The important part is that it clearly shows each step in the bedtime routine. It's so important that you keep the activities calm and predictable every night. This way, it allows your child's body to learn the cues for when they need to start winding down. Now, I know that this strategy is typically one of the toughest ones for parents. So if you're already thinking, but Elmi, we've tried our routine and it doesn't work for us, know that not all routines are created equal. A routine isn't just do bath, brush your teeth, and read a book. If we could just tell our children do that, they would, but they're not doing it on their own. So a routine is about choosing the right timing and predictability. The visual schedule as a strategy is to help your child see the steps, but the routine itself that you create needs to make sense for your child. It needs to be consistent and serve the purpose of preparing the child to go to sleep. That's highly dependent on what your child's needs are. And of course, you being the parent, you're the expert on your child, so you know what your child will need. So, if you've tried a routine before and it has not worked before, I invite you to take a look at what that routine looked like when you implemented and see if it actually served the need of preparing your child going to sleep. A couple of mistakes to avoid when doing your bedtime routines is keeping your child up late, hoping that they'll be extra tired. Like I mentioned, when they are overtired, they actually don't crash. They fight the sleep harder, and it looks the opposite of tired. So don't try to overtire them because that gives you the opposite energy of what you're looking for. And the second mistake to avoid is to giving in to bedtime resistance. A lot of the times, what happens when you do something different as a parent is that your child will show even more resistance. The behavior will get worse before it gets better. Make sure that you stay calm and consistent to set those limits, because when you give in the middle of that negotiation or in the middle of that escalation, it actually will get worse. So don't give in to your bedtime resistance. Make sure that you set your limits and you stay with them. And with that, I will open it up for questions. Let's see what I have. Actually, I have one that came in earlier, and this says, what if my kid just doesn't care about routines? Nothing works with them. I actually totally hear you on this one. A lot of the times parents report this to me, like, it's just the routines don't work for my child. Some kids, especially those who are strong willed or neurodivergent, may actually push harder when you introduce a structure. And that is because they are looking even harder for that predictability. It doesn't mean that the routine doesn't work for them. It just means usually that they need more buy in because they're looking for more control. So, what you can do for this is actually collaborate with them on their routine. Do you want to do your teeth first, or do you want to put your pajamas? The more that you try to give them control in those routines, the more likely that they are going to buy in. It also means that they need more clarity. So using the visuals, using timers, countdowns, so that they can see what is expected will help with this if you feel like the routine is not working for your child. And then the third thing that could be a reason for why your child resists those routines is that they actually just need more time. Strong-willed kids, again, like I mentioned, they want more control. They want more predictability. So they're going to take longer to adjust to a new routine that you're establishing. So you just stick with it a little longer and see if with calm and consistency, they will adapt and adjust. My child gets overstimulated easily, and by bedtime, they're in fully sensory overload. How do I help them downshift instead of melting down? This is a great question. This is going to be part of your bedtime routine. What I would recommend, I love that you already recognize that your child already gets overstimulated easily, right? And you know that by bedtime, they are on sensory overload. So, what I would recommend is that before you hit that threshold with your child where they are overstimulated and on overload, that you start activities that allow them to calm down. So, easier activities like reading a book, playtime that is a little bit low energy, like arts, crafts, Play Doh, nothing outside, not writing a book, not jumping on the bed, nothing that is going to get their heart rate up, anything that is calming. I would turn down the lights a little bit even more. So, again, right before you know your child is about to hit that threshold, reduce the activity level, reduce the sensory stimulation so that you can slowly start preparing them for that bedtime routine and you avoid that meltdown altogether. Um, a parent bedtime feels like the worst part of our day. How can we bring more connection into bedtime while still holding boundaries? That is a good question. I typically recommend that you actually put connection like as a part of the schedule, embed it within, especially for those kiddos who are like 0 to 5, 0 to 6. Most of the time, they are going to be looking for some connection. And especially if they have siblings, if you have a busy day, which most parents do, they are going to be looking for that connection time. So what I recommend typically is to front load it. Make sure that you spend whatever amount of time that you can allocate to your child right before you start your bedtime routine, whether it is 10, 15, 20 minutes of uninterrupted, dedicated playtime, snuggle time, whatever that might be. That actually helps you and the child build that connection and make that bond stronger to the point that they almost reduce the bedtime resistance. This way, if you connect, you're able to hold those boundaries a little easier because that child is going to give you less resistance if you spend that connection time in advance. How do I know if my child's bedtime behavior is just resistance versus their nervous system being totally dysregulated? Good question. It's actually really hard to know. Most of the time, it's probably going to be both. So what happens initially is that the body gets dysregulated, and then what happens after a behavior occurs, say for example, they are showing you resistance because their body is dysregulated. What they learn over time is what your response is to that behavior. So what may have started as their nervous system be dysregulated becomes something that they learned as a behavior response for whatever it is. So there is no way to really know. It's probably both. So what you want to do is address the nervous system first and also simultaneously hold your boundaries. When you hold your boundaries while you address the nervous system, then you're addressing both. Let me see. I answered this one. If my child wakes up screaming or confused in the middle of the night, what should I do in that exact moment? That's a great question. That's kind of dependent on. I would like to ask more questions on what your bedtime routine looks like. Does your child is are they dependent on you falling asleep? If assuming that they are waking up screaming and confused in the middle of the night, I am assuming that they're probably not able to fall asleep on their own. So, what I would do is actually go and help them fall asleep again. This way, you don't have this like escalation at 3 in the morning. But I also would recommend that you take the steps necessary to help them fall asleep on their own, which is what I talked about reducing your presence over time. So, if you lay with them, make sure that you sit with them and you slowly fade yourself out. I would assume that if they're waking up screaming and confused in the middle of the night, they don't know how to fall asleep independently. So that's what I would recommend, that you work on helping them fall asleep independently, but address it in that moment, because we don't want to dysregulate them if they're not ready to fall asleep on their own. How do I adjust bedtime on days when naps run late or wake up time is off? Everything feels unpredictable. Generally speaking, I would recommend to try to get as predictable as possible. Of course, lives. So if things happen, like you're on vacation, it's a holiday, kids are at school, etc., and you have nap time later in the day, adjust. What I would recommend is to adjust your bedtime to a later time to account for that wake window that I talked about. Is very important. Sleep is based on the body need to actually sleep. So if the body does not need to sleep, your child is more than likely going to resist bedtime. So what I would recommend is that if you wake up later for your nap time, that you put that child to bed later. That way you avoid the bedtime resistance. When bedtime gets hard, it's so tempting to give in just to keep the peace. How do we stay consistent without escalating things? Good question. Like any boundary, it is always going to be harder initially when you first implement it. This is because the behavior gets worse before it gets better. An example that I like to use for parents to understand this is the example of the vending machine, right? When you go into a vending machine and you put your $2 in, and then you see your chips get stuck, the first thing that you tend to do is push the buttons, hit on the machine, try to move it, and then you realize that you don't have another dollar. You realize that you don't have another dollar and that your chips are not coming out. So you eventually walk away, right? You pushing the buttons, hitting the machine, and doing all this stuff is your behavior getting worse before you walked away. So before getting better. That is going to be the same for any boundary that you try to establish with your child, including bedtime. So, to make it easier for consistent boundaries around bedtime, I would highly recommend that you start with the biological needs. So, track their wake windows, establish a better schedule for their body needs, for your specific sleep needs for your child. And then, once that is figured out, then really pick the boundary that you're going to stick with. Is it going to be lights out at this time? And then be prepared to overcome that hump, to overcome that escalation, because only when you make it over that hump, it's when you actually start seeing results and it will actually get better. So I believe that is the last question for today. I will see you guys next time.